Raj Singh, your host from Six of Tracy page, and I have my co-host Ritesh Atwal along with me. And today we are live to talk about measures. So one of the measures that's relevantly very much in the high visibility is Measure Y. So there are a lot of questions and clarifications people are asking for. What is Measure Y? So that is the reason we are today hosting this informative session with different folks who can give the answer, who can provide the information for us, so we can make the educational decision what is right thing to do on your ballot. So that being said, I just want to put the disclaimer out there. Today, we are not endorsing or suggesting to vote yes or no on this measure. We're just keeping it informative session. Now I would like Ritesh to introduce our panel today so we can get going and start going over the measure questions.
Thank you very much, Raj. So as we all are here for an informative discussion on ValleyLink as well as Measure Y, I'll request Bob to please briefly introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Bob Gutierrez. I'm the interim president and CEO of the San Joaquin Partnership. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much, Bob. Dino, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Dino Margaros, and I am the executive director for Tracy City Center Association, now known as Downtown Tracy.
Thank you very much, Dino. Michael?
Hey, thanks for inviting me. I'm Michael Tree. I'm the executive director with the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Valley Regional Rail Authority, which is planning the ValleyLink project.
Thank you very much, Michael. Vince?
I'm Vince Moreno. I'm the associate broker with California Advantage Real Estate and Tracy Family since '86.
Thank you very much, Vince. Dan?
Hi, Dan Ariola, council member for the city of Tracy.
Thank you very much, Dan. Radisha, please.
Hi, I'm Rhodesia Ransom, council member for the city of Tracy as well.
Thank you very much, all. Thank you for being here. So let's start with our first question of this session. So will you please explain what ValleyLink light rail is?
Great question. I'll take that question. The ValleyLink Rail is a passenger rail project. I'm sure most of us are really familiar with the traffic that's on the 205 and the 580 going in between the San Joaquin County and the Bay Area. So that traffic's nearly 100,000 commuters a day. And in 2017, AB 758, which was authored by Assemblymember Eggman, set up the Tri-Valley San Joaquin Valley Regional Rail Authority to come up with a transportation alternative in that alignment. And so that project is now known as the ValleyLink Passenger Rail Project. And in short, ValleyLink is broken into two phases. Phase one is a 42-mile, 7-station phase, which goes between the ACE North Lathrop Station down through the River Islands development into downtown Tracy, where you have your train depot, onto a station which is known as the Mountain House Station, then up and over the Altamont into two stations in Livermore before the train goes into the Dublin Pleasanton BART station. And so the essence is jump on ValleyLink and you'll have a quick, easy connection with BART into the Bay Area. Just a couple of other things about what is ValleyLink. The train is estimated to have 33,000 passengers per day in the year 2040, and also a GHG reduction or an emission savings of between 33,000 metric tons of GHG per year to 42,000 tons of GHG metric tons of GHG reduction, depending on the technology that's used. So the most likely technology for the train is a zero emission technology, where we would have catenary lines in the Altamont, and the train would run on batteries in the Tri-Valley section and also the San Joaquin section. Probably just a couple of other tidbits of information in regard to the ValleyLink project. We're hoping to have the train up and running in late 2027 to early 2028. And important to note in regard to the construction of the train is that it will create 22,000 jobs with an economic impact in the region of $3.5 billion. And during operation, the train would have an economic impact of creating 400 jobs with $69 million of impact per year. So that's just a quick couple of comments in regard to the Valley Link train. We're excited. It is being planned in entirely existing transportation corridor rights of way. So we're hoping for an efficient way of getting the train up and going quickly for commuters.
Thank you very much, Michael. Appreciate it. One thing comes to my mind. Will you please explain briefly what the GHG reduction is?
Yeah, so that's a greenhouse gas emissions reduction. So there's approximately 99.4 million vehicle miles traveled that would be a reduction and associated with the Valley Link project in 2040. And that would create these emission savings and help with the climate change and the other concerns with the environment that we worry about as we travel in these automobiles.
Thank you very much, Michael. So now to take it back to Raj to take us further into the discussion. So Raj, I think you're on mute. So Raj, I think you're on mute, so have to unmute. Thank you. No, still on mute. So still on mute, Raj. So I think I'll go with the second question. So the second question is, so will you please explain what transit-oriented development is?
I think Rhodesia and I can talk about that. I'll let Rhodesia go ahead and start off.
Rhodesia, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
I apologize for that. So thank you for that question. Transit-oriented development is a very simple concept. It's a concept in regional planning that really orients how you do business, how you live, work, and entertain yourself in regards to building a community that's built around transit. It's so people can get to work. You'll have walkable neighborhoods. You'll have access to whether it's entertainment, restaurants, jobs. And so it's one of those things where you see in the downtown area specifically, a lot of different cities, you'll see that that's a growing thing, being able to connect transit to people. And when you have a transit-oriented development, it's pretty dense in regards to in the proximity to the actual transit, whether it's train, whether it's boats, or it depends on what kind of community you're in. In our community, transit-oriented development will be connected very much with the ACE Rail or the Valley Link once that's completed. And it's a way to make sure that there is enough passengers, it's enough to keep the economy going. It would actually help build an economy in a particular area. So transit-oriented development is very regionally oriented around transit and brings all of the elements of what you need to have a community into one area.
Exactly. And to piggyback a little bit off of what Rhodesia said, as it relates to our downtown, it's an urban planning type of plan. It's a design of residential businesses, leisure space, walking paths, parks, those kinds of things, all within a half mile, all related to transit-oriented development, which is, the train, Valley Link train. So it's trying to blend the train and the living spaces and the leisure spaces and combining them into our downtown space. So, it's a win-win synergistic positive project for our downtown.
Thank you very much, Rhodesia and Dino. So now I'll request Raj to continue us in further discussion.
I think this time I'm on not mute. People can listen to me.
Yep.
Okay. So our next question is, we covered what Valley Link is, what TOD is, transit-oriented development. Now the main question comes, as our show says, what is Measure Y? So can you guys explain to the audience, to the voters, what is Measure Y?
All right, I can kind of tackle that one. So what Measure Y is for the city of Tracy specifically, it creates that transit-oriented development area that Dino and Rhodesia were just talking about it. It creates that area near existing or proposed rail stations. And so what that means for the city of Tracy in particular is it allows the city council to designate those areas that are proposed to be this transit-oriented development. So when we talk about transit-oriented development, what it is it's this idea, right? It's kind of this theory of how to build a city. What Measure Y does, it connects the theory to the law, and it codifies it within the Tracy Municipal Code so that we can actually enact it. And what it does is it creates language that matches the requirements of the proposals, particularly for Valley Link, to make sure that we can meet those standards so that when Valley Link comes, we make sure that it comes to Tracy. And so I think that there's been a lot of confusion about a lot of the language. Unfortunately, this is why people hate lawyers, because it's very tough. But what it does is it amends the municipal code for Tracy in particular to match the absolute requirements necessary for Valley Link, and also some of the other things that we've seen when applying for state, federal funding to meet the needs that we can have the TOD here in Tracy, so that we are the most attractive for grants, and then so that we qualify for that actually the station here in Tracy, in downtown Tracy, for Valley Link. We, as a council, in having the discussion about it, there's been discussion about the housing component. So what it does is one of the requirements for Valley Link is to have the 2,200 units. And so we kind of played around with it. And so a lot of the gritty details that go into the law are about the differences in the housing. So for the 2,200 housing units, it doesn't mean that they're going to get built, but what it means is that they have the capacity to be built, which is a requirement for Valley Link. And what we did is we actually put in some inclusionary housing requirements so that 10% of any ownership units and 10% of any rental units are going to be set at affordable housing levels. And this was me being a complete nerd at the city council meeting, but we really got into the details and connecting the law to the language so that it's focused on Tracy median income levels. And so 5% is at the 100% median income level for rentals, and then 5% is at the 80% of median income level for Tracy for rentals as well. And just so everyone knows, the average income in Tracy, the median level is 88,000. And so basically you take the 88,000 and then that's how you do the math there. But because it gets tricky, you want to write the law so it's attached to the median levels and not a certain number. So that way, when the median income level fluctuates, we've already taken care of it. So basically what Measure Y does is it's a voter measure to make sure that we have transit-oriented development here in Tracy. And it's written in such a way to make sure that we maintain those qualifications and that we really are giving us the flexibility we need to build that focused transit-oriented development in downtown Tracy. And that's basically what it does. And it's one of the requirements that we need to make sure that Valley Link gets to Tracy.
Thank you very much.
Would you look in?
Yeah, go ahead, Raj.
Thank you, Dan, for covering that. I have a clarifying question. You said the requirement is to build the 122 units, but on the same side, you said they may or may not happen. Can you kind of explain on that? If it's a requirement, then doesn't it become a mandatory to build that many units?
No. So basically, the 2,200 housing unit requirement is part of the it's the requirement for Valley Link, but it's the capacity for 2,200 units. So think of this as a capacity versus actually doing it. So this is still going to need to go through the Planning Commission. This doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're going to build to 2,200 units, but we need to have the capacity to do it, because that's how you build actual transit-oriented development moving forward. This is the type of residency of the future. We're trying to get cars off the road, and for a lot of particularly young professionals, people like me, when I lived in downtown LA, I didn't have a car. You don't have a car because you can walk to your grocery store, you can walk to your the TOD stations for your job, and so that's the whole point of it. So it's not to make sure that 2,200 units are here, but it's the capacity to do it. and it's built in a specific type of way. So it's all centralized right there in downtown Tracy. We're trying to oppose urban sprawl. So it's focused there, right there in downtown Tracy. So you can go ahead and get your food in downtown Tracy. You can hang out and have fun in downtown Tracy, and you can get to your job from that station in downtown Tracy. So it's the capacity is required per the law, but any proposal will have to go through the planning commission. It's still going to go through those normal processes. It just makes the capacity to build those units available, which would be a requirement to bring that station to Tracy. Otherwise, it would go right on by. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. So,
Thank you for explaining that. It does make sense. That answers the overall question. So thank you.
yeah, so then one thing is, so the Measure Y does is it ties the station with transit-oriented development. So can another way we can say that it is solely tied to the station itself also? So if there is yes, that means station will be there. If there is no station in Tracy.
Sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
So I was trying to say, so is Measure Y, we can say another way, we can say it is tied to the train station as well. If there is yes, that means there is a station. If there is no, that means there is no station in Tracy.
If we don't have a transit-oriented development plan for downtown Tracy, we do not qualify for the stations along the corridor for Valley Link. So
Okay.
if we want, so it's Valley Link is a separate entity, and they have certain requirements for joining Valley Link. And the city of Tracy's been a part of that as part of the board, but they set those requirements. If the city of Tracy wants to make sure that we have a stop here in Tracy, we have to meet those requirements. It's the same thing that we do for a lot of other state and federal programs. We have to create the law and zone in particular ways to qualify. So if we want a station in downtown Tracy, yes, we do need that transit-oriented development plan in place, and that's what Measure Y does.
And I think Michael Tree could talk a little bit about the funding mechanism. Really, what we're talking about is the requirement for the competitive funding nature on state and federal level. So if Michael could just chime in and clarify a little bit on the funding nature, that's really what we're talking about here.
Yeah, that's it's a really good point. As you create your station area plans, your TOD development, you not only qualify for the train per the policy that the board has set, but you also increase your chances greatly as we look for state and federal funding based on the fact that you do have that TOD plan in place. It's a huge issue, climate change, and being able to create development and have public transit in a way that reduces that greenhouse gas emissions.
So, is it okay if I provide some clarification? I think it's important to know that Measure Y is actually, it's us giving the voters a chance. So we say that we want to be able to have the Valley Link. We're saying that we want to be able to improve downtown and have people asking all the time why we don't have certain things in our town. And then a lot of that goes into being able to meet basic requirements. It's just like when people ask me, why don't we have Trader Joe's? We don't meet requirements for Trader Joe's. That's why we don't have it. The same with Valley Link. So Valley Link has some very specific requirements. In addition to that, we were already having conversations for many years about how we can actually enhance the downtown and how we can actually build a more synergistic downtown where you can live, work, play, and access all of those things so that you have those synergies that actually build the economy there. The difference is that with Measure Y, it gives us the opportunity to say, yes, we will authorize the Planning Commission to approve additional units of housing down there. And what we've also added was affordable by design. That did not have to be included in there, but we've heard our community very loud and clear when it comes to affordable housing, and we are looking to be able to meet the workforce affordable housing so that people who are holding jobs in our town can actually live here. So with the Valley Link, they have the requirements. If we don't pass it, that's basically the voters saying that, it doesn't matter to us that we don't meet the requirements for Valley Link. So we are happy to have, I'm happy that Mr. Tree is here to explain it, because he's the rail authority, as opposed to me, a council member, trying to explain the requirements of the rail authority. I think it's also important to know that other cities have been very competitive in trying to also do what we're doing. We have Mr. Gutierrez here. I serve on the San Joaquin Partnership as a board member, and I really would love to hear what his take is in regards to how this actually helps our local economy as well.
Well, thank you for that, Councilmember Ransom. Pleasure to be here today. Great conversation, great opportunity ahead of the community. I think you've heard all the reasons why, things like Measure Y can be a resource to a future in a community. It attracts opportunities like Valley Link. It attracts the ability to have what you want in your own community. It also provides an opportunity for businesses to see that they have access to their workforce here in the Central Valley on a quick basis. This is going to be a quick service that goes through our community, and it goes through your city in Tracy. So this will give a lot of opportunity to move workers, in different sectors from the Central Valley over to the Bay Area and back and forth in a timely manner. We've worked a lot with a lot of brokers lately, and at the partnership, we're an economic development corporation. So we get an opportunity to sit in front of brokers on a regular basis. And what they're telling us is they need access to their workforce. They know they have, like Michael said, 100,000 people coming over to the Hill each day for work. They need to get there quicker, and they need to do it in a more economic way. And so as we get more migration out of the Bay Area, this creates not only an opportunity, but a responsibility to making sure that we're not having more cars on the road as people are going back and forth to the Bay Area, and we're providing adequate transportation for that. This is going to be a benefit for all of San Joaquin, Tracy being in the center of that with their TOD. Without an opportunity zone or redevelopment, this is, again, a unique opportunity to pave the way for your future there in the city of Tracy. So you got some good folks working on this. And, one of the other things I'll say is, infrastructure development leads to economic growth in any community. And so when you have a plan in place, businesses are attracted to that. We're getting calls constantly about not only how to get their employees over the hill, but also as a result of COVID, how can we have these smaller campuses here in the Central Valley, here in San Joaquin County, here in Tracy? So, again, these are opportunities to create livable, workable entertainment areas that people can get to and from work, and they can also have those shared experiences within their own community as well, without having to go too far, but having access to go that far when they need to. So the remote worker of today is going to have the opportunity to check in with their employer on a regular basis in the future now. And they might not have to go every day, but they're going to go 3 days a week. And so it's transportation opportunities like this with Valley Link, and then having that TOD there in Tracy really allows an opportunity to grow your community to complement that so that we can have access to the Valley Link. So that's what we see in economic development. There's been some great partnerships that have been forged through this process. The San Joaquin Partnership works with the Bay Area Council, Opportunity Stanislaus, and the Greater Sacramento Economic Development Council. And so we've actually formed together with an MOU, our own Northern California neighborhood. Why does that have a benefit to you? It's basically, it allows us to leverage projects like this, concepts like TODs in our community with other partners outside the area that are also going to have a benefit to this. So Tracy doesn't have to carry all the heavy lifting themselves. We have great partners that are here to make it happen with you, and will be there along the planning process. So that's what I have to say for economic development. I think you guys are on the right track, and I think this is a great opportunity for the voters in Tracy to make an investment in their own community.
No, thank you very much, Bob. So now we know what Measure Y is, transit-oriented development, and thank you for sharing the perspective of economic development. Now let's move on to, can you share how much money is in the bank for this project?
So I'll take that question. Yes, so it's virtually unheard of that a train being planned that's in the environmental process already has a third of its funding identified. But that's the case with Valley Link. Just really quickly, you have $400 million in Measure BB, which is a local transportation sales tax in Alameda County that's been identified for the project. You have $188 million in bridge toll. You have $80 million in developer fees in Alameda County. The city of Tracy has provided an option to the rail authority for a $40 million property, a 200-acre parcel for the operations and maintenance facility for the train. And then also in the city of Lathrop, within our feasibility report, is identified $86 million in developer fees and tax increment. So all told, you have $708 million identified, with an additional $86 million soon to come online for the project. So it's off to a fantastic start. Again, it's virtually unheard of that a project that's just finishing up its EIR would have a third of the funding identified.
So thank you, Michael. So you mentioned that 1/3 of the funding. So we have the sources. Go ahead, Raj.
Nothing. I think guys are probably going to have the same follow-up question. So you said we have the third part of the funding for the project. So I think the main imperative question is to know, where is the rest of the money going to come to complete this project? Can you highlight us on that part?
Well, certainly with your good start, you have money now that you can leverage. And so we're looking very closely at programs at the state level. The TIRSUP program, which is an SB1 program, is available for the project. And so applications will be flowing in the near future. With this money is the local match. You've also have congested corridors funding at the state level. So San Joaquin COG has been instrumental in setting up your congested corridor program to include Valley Link. You also have a variety of federal funds which could be available for the project. New Starts could be a major component of funding the Valley Link, and also the BUILD program, the infra program. So there are lots of opportunity. In particular, I would probably hone in on your federal stimulus money. The legislature, certainly as you're aware, is working on a stimulus infrastructure package. And this is the type of project that brings home tens of thousands of jobs in the construction process. And we'll certainly have the eye of the legislature. Certainly your congressman has been working towards this project being included in such a federal stimulus infrastructure package.
Thank you very much, Michael. So you explained so there is funding and what are the sources for that. So next thing, can we just explore what kind of taxes which will be associated with Measure Y?
So if I can take that one briefly. So the way that Measure Y is written, there's no tax increase. It basically it creates the opportunity for the legal requirements that are necessary, but there's no tax increase associated. That's why we need to work together to get the funding necessary.
Yes, I would echo what Councilmember Arreola mentioned as well. What we've seen for the Valley Link is that some communities like the Bay Area, they have their measure. That's their investment. They're trying to get approved so that they can actually do their tax measure to contribute. In our county, we've asked that it be prioritized. So we finally got to the point where it's actually been prioritized, but it's not a tax. Measure Y has no tax associated with the measure. That would have to be clearly written. It would be written as a tax. It's not a tax. It's written as the authorization to provide an exemption, so that if there is a housing related to this transit-oriented development where there will be rail travel, and we want the opportunity to compete with the Valley Link, then the voters will vote on that. There's no tax associated with it. We would have to be very clear about that, and that would have to go to the voters.
Thank you very much, Rhodesia. Now I'll request Raj to take us further into the conversation.
Right. So this is very useful information all you guys are sharing regarding ValleyLink, Measure Y, the funds, and the tax. So I think the next thing that I think wanted to understand, do other cities nearby or any other cities, do they have the TOD, transit oriented development?
Well, Bob
So I'll
left.
start.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts on that. Certainly, it's a requirement of any station planning that it have a minimum of 2,200 units within a half mile. So we have stations in Livermore, we have station in Tracy, and we also have a station in River Islands, which is part of Lathrop, and also the ACE North Lathrop station. So all of those stations, except for what we call the Mountain House station, which is really in kind of a warehouse environment, probably not susceptible to having lots of housing units, but all of the other stations currently have transit-oriented development planning in process. So some are just starting, others are far along. But I think it's important to note, for example, River Islands has discussions with the city of Lathrop to add an additional 4,000 units in the vicinity of the River Islands station. Both of the Livermore stations have either a specific plan already in process, which will be shortly approved by their council, or they're in the process. Each of those Livermore stations having 4,000 housing units around the station area. So, other stations do have TODs. It's a requirement for the train, and they're certainly taking advantage of an opportunity to really provide a lot of vitality around the stations, a lot of opportunity for mixed development, lots of pedestrian and biking opportunities near the station, which is really, there are a lot of folks who are creating a demand for that type of development, which not only helps the train, but certainly helps the community and the environment.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. So,
and to piggyback a little bit on Michael, I think I want to emphasize that the only reason we here in Tracy are even having this discussion is because of our GMO, which is the Growth Management Ordinance. So you can see how critical it is, and how they're proceeding in Livermore with two stations, two of them, River Islands and then North Lathrop. The reason we're having this discussion is because we're limited by our Growth Management Ordinance for the housing component of this. And that's where the link is. Everybody's trying to find, what is the link to this Measure Y to the train? The link is, without the ability, and I think Dan really clarified, without the ability, not the guarantee of building these homes, but the ability to build these homes, the ValleyLink train may not get funding on the San Joaquin County side. And then, Michael might be able to talk a little bit about how that funding may or may not look, but it's just critical that we get something done. And we're the only, municipality or city that's in this particular situation. The other ones, my understanding, and Michael could correct me, is that they aren't going through the same process because they don't have a GMO to deal with.
That's correct.
So thank you very much, Michael and Dino. So as you have mentioned, other cities, they have the plans of the stations, they have the similar TOD or transit-oriented development plans. So are the requirements exactly same for those cities as the requirements are for Tracy, or the requirements are different for different cities and different for different stations?
From a ValleyLink perspective, they're all the same. All the requirements are uniform throughout the phase one of ValleyLink.
Okay, no, thank you very much. So, and now we understand what the stations are, what transit-oriented plan is, and Measure Y. So let's move further into a discussion. So what kinds of trains would be used in our train stations for ValleyLink?
That's a good question. So the trains are called multiple unit trains. If any of you have seen the EBART train that is circulating to Antioch, for example, that's a multiple unit train. So it's not as large as a full locomotive train that you might see in freight. But these trains, as we're planning them, are 3-car trains that can be linked together. So ultimately, as ridership increases, you could have multiple 3-car trains linked. The trains, basically, we're looking at a variety of ways or technologies for the train. As I mentioned earlier, the most likely scenario ultimately is to have catenary line in the Altamont section, which would hook to the train as it's traveling in the Altamont, feed it with electricity to have lots of torque and power to operate quickly in the Altamont. And then when it's on the flat areas in the Tri-Valley and in the San Joaquin County, it would operate on battery. So a zero emission technology has been a really important goal for the board of directors. Additionally, at the stations, we're planning for solar, also at the operations and maintenance facility. So we're really looking for sustainability and low, if not low to no impact on the environment, being able to create our own energy for the train system.
Thank you very much, Michael, for touching that. So so we are seeing this will drastically have an impact on our commuters. So what do you think? So how much impact will it have on the daily commuters that will use the Valley Link train?
So it's been our biggest problem in planning Valley Link is that a lot of people want to ride Valley Link, and it needs to have great connectivity, not only in the San Joaquin County with the ACE system and the bus systems, but also in the Bay Area. And our ridership modeling is showing in 2040, which is kind of a common number used to compare other transit projects that are in planning. Our ridership modeling is showing 33,000 rides a day. So a significant impact on the 580.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So yeah, commuters, you explained so the impact on the commuters. So next I have a thing in mind. So why does Measure Y include a housing component?
Measure Y is the housing component of the, it's an opportunity to meet the requirements for the housing component. So the only reason Measure Y had to be a measure is because we, with our current management ordinance, we could not commit to being able to meet the requirements of Valley Link. So we have to take it to the voters and see if the voters are, you know, equally committed to being able to meet those requirements. And that's, it's a measure, the measure is about being able to meet the requirement, which is to provide the density in housing for the train. And it's not just other trains, you know, we want to be able to, whatever the transit mechanisms are that can help get people off of the roads, we want to make sure that if there is an opportunity to meet their requirements as well, that we can do that. So when we were in the council putting together this measure to bring before the community to say, where do we stand as a community, we kind of toyed around with, do we either want to put Valley Link in there, or do we just want to say, you know, commuter rail, or what language is important to use? Because Valley Link could change their name, but it's all about being able to connect transit to the housing in order to meet the requirements, and also to have that synergy that builds on the community. You don't just want a train to, you know, come through and not have that economic connection, that economic development connection. So that Measure Y is all about being able to meet the requirement for the housing, which is transit-oriented housing. And transit-oriented housing is synergistic, it's shopping, it's, you know, it's trails and all of those different things that we continue to speak about. And Mountain House was built as a transit-oriented community. River Islands was built as transit-oriented as well, and they're you know, adding to that. So we are in a unique situation that ordinarily this would just be a decision where to go to the planning commission. You know, we go through the council and say we want to write this plan and start working this specific plan to meet the Valley Link requirement. But our community is a little unique because we had a pre-existing management ordinance that we need to go to the voters and say, hey, this is what the opportunity is, yes or no.
Thank you very much, Radisha. So there is another terminology that the voters would like to just kind of get clarification on. So what does bow tie area means?
I'll take that one from a historic Tracy angle. So the bow tie refers to the area near 6th Street and Central Avenue in downtown Tracy. And where it came from is if you look at an overview from, let's say, Google Earth, the land is kind of in the shape of a bow tie. It's got kind of like two triangles on either side of the roundabout. So we just affectionately refer to it as the bow tie, and that's kind of what it's been historically as it relates to our history as a train town. So yeah, it's just an affectionate name, for that particular area of downtown.
So as this area, this is very much near the station or the planned Valley Link area. So will there be some cost associated to clean up the bow tie area? If there will be, what do you expect what the cost would be?
Sure, I can speak to this. In this case, there is actually precedent for the cleanup, some environmental impact reports that have been done. Two of these that I want to bring to light. The first was written by a company called EIP Associates. This was back in February of 2007 to look at mitigating that land and bringing it up to residential standard. At that time, they estimated that the cost of the entire cleanup for that area would be just over $11 million. If you do account for current inflation, that puts that cost at $13.3 million. There was a second report that was written by Nino and Moore. That was in February 2008, also to the City Council. And again, cleaning it up to residential standard, which is the highest standard for that area. They pegged it at $10.5 million. And again, if you account for inflation, this total would be $12.7 in 2020 dollars. So there is cost associated with the cleanup. That's not anything that's unknown for most people. Those are the costs that I've been able to see, and basing them on inflation, that's about where it would be.
Thank you very much, Vince. So now the follow-up would be, so who will be paying or covering for this cost?
That's going to be whoever buys it.
Yeah.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Dan was saying, as in common in any real estate transaction, that cleanup cost would either be on the controlling entity, which is a railroad currently, or whomever buys that land to develop it.
It's absolutely not taxpayer. It's not going to be on the taxpayer dime. It's a private transaction. There's no government entities involved in the land purchase or sale or anything like that. So it would be a private developer and the railroad negotiating who's going to do that cleanup and, the cost associated in the sales transaction. It's that simple.
Thank you very much. So, and another terminology that the voters, they want to get clarification on, that is the eminent domain. And what is eminent domain, and is eminent domain part of Measure A or Measure Y? Sorry.
I can talk a little bit about that, maybe some clarity from Michael Tree, but there is no eminent domain. This is all infill project land. So this is existing vacant land in the bow tie area in UR1. It's just vacant land right now. So nobody's land is being taken. There is no eminent domain necessary to bring the train here. My understanding that even the path of the train, the railroad tracks of the train, there is no eminent domain even for that. So it's a pretty simple, clear project that's not going to run into eminent domain and removing people from their homes. There's zero of that happening. So it's just not necessary. So there's plenty of land, there's plenty of space, even for double tracking the train. I believe, Michael, there's enough room for that. So that's more efficiently run, but there is no eminent domain as a part of, Measure Y or as a part of Valley Link Light Rail itself.
Yeah, I'd say that's correct, and certainly all these plans, we're working with UP on them, and they're certainly contingent on their approval, but there's lots of right-of-way. And so, like I mentioned early on, this is a unique transportation project in that it is entirely within existing transportation rights-of-way. So minimal eminent domain, certainly none that we've identified in San Joaquin County.
Thank you very much, Dino and Michael, for clarifying this. So as this project is being proposed in the vicinity or in the downtown area, So how do you think that it will help with the downtown revitalization efforts?
It's the catalyst that we've been looking for years. I think you look at what TCCA has done, Tracy City Center Association has done and accomplished over the last 10 years. I think most people will be impressed and happy with what we've been able to do. We brought restaurants, we brought retail, we've brought events, the Grand Theater, the Downtown Plaza. So much has happened in those 10 years. That has happened relatively organically. But to take it to the next level, and we hear this every day, we want to be like so-and-so. Why can't we have this? Why can't, the Trader Joe's of the world? You have to have a catalyst for that to happen. This is a catalyst of epic opportunity that we will only see probably once in our lifetime. I think we've all been watching the bow tie sit there empty with tumbleweeds for the last 20, 30, 40 years. This will bring people downtown. It will allow them to work, live, shop, play, dine downtown. That's the whole point of this. It's a catalyst for that to happen. It's a catalyst for business expansion. We talk about Valley Link in and of itself as a conduit for things to happen, and that works both ways. I think Michael and Rhodesia talked about, it's not just people going over the hill, it's attracting those people back over here from that hill as part of our workforce. We talk about education levels that we want to increase here. So, those workers are coming from somewhere. And then you look further down the line, it's like, other people believe it or not, a lot of people want to work in Tracy. It's coming from the east to get here in and of itself, so it works in all directions. But it's critical if we want downtown Tracy to get to the next level, to, help us move on some of this infill land that's, sporadically throughout our downtown, some of the vacant buildings throughout our downtown. This will help us to help fill those empty spots.
Yeah. And if I may piggyback on that. So I was on planning commission before I got on city council for 7 years, and we brought in the consultant that actually redesigned and redeveloped downtown Livermore. Everyone was asking, how can we make this Tracy downtown more like a downtown Livermore? I will say what Tika has done has been in spite of the conditions that we have to be able to, get these restaurants, like their downtown developers or business owners, property owners are working really hard to do that because they're putting that synergy together. But we knew years ago when we got that plan on what we need to do to revitalize downtown, that we needed more density, that we needed more synergy, that we needed more opportunity to have live work opportunities so that downtown would have an automatic client. The problem without having the residences close to the shops is there's really no one to shop there. And having a bedroom community where everyone's gone to work in the day in the Bay Area, we definitely don't have those opportunities. So people like me who do work in town, we can't get a restaurant on a Monday because they have to take off Sunday and Monday because there's not enough people in that area, living in that area, to actually be able to feed those businesses, to keep them going. So they have to schedule themselves in a way that works for them to keep their business going because they love our community and they want to be in that downtown. But we have done a lot in spite of not really having the right climate down there. And so that is what we're putting out there. And we've known this for many years because we had several different consultant reports, like I said, and we were trying to put the conditions there before there was a train, and now the train is requiring those same conditions we knew about more than 10 years ago. So at this point, it's really not up to people who understand and know what's at stake. It's really up to making sure that we get people like Mr. Tree to really kind of dispel some of the myths and let people decide for themselves so that maybe we can finally have the things that people have been asking for.
And a little bit to add on, Rhodesia 100% right. We talked to our consultant, our downtown consultant, and the three pillars that we look at and what we do, what we have control over is higher density residential. And I think the critical thing here is the residential that we're looking at for the downtown bow tie. It's residential that we don't have. It's different types of residential. It's live work lofts. It's not single family homes necessarily that we're used to. It's different types of product that are good for the younger generation. It's people that want a more urban type situation, but it's those rooftops that provide the walkability for our downtown that we're critically missing. And Rhodesia hit it on the nail. It's like we've got businesses that are closed on Sundays and Mondays. They wouldn't be closed if it was profitable, I assure you. So what they're trying to do is they're picking the days that they're the busiest, that it makes the most sense. We want them to extend into the days and into the nights and all of the weekends, so we have life every single day of the week. We're just not quite there yet. We're better, but we're not quite there. The other two pillars that I mentioned, restaurants, we're doing a really good job of attracting those businesses. And then culture and art-based activities and events. So those we have a little bit more control over. We have the, Gem of Downtown, which is the Grand Theater Center for the Arts. We do, in conjunction with City of Tracy, we do, tons of events all year long. Obviously not during COVID times, but, in a traditional year, we would almost be having an event every single weekend of the summer. So all of these things come into play to bring to life our downtown, but housing is a critical component. So that's why we're really focused on a different type of housing for downtown, and that synergy is absolutely critical for us as a catalyst for downtown going forward.
Well, thank you very much, Dino and Rhodesia. Just tying into the aspect of downtown revitalization with the Measure Y. So now we understand what Measure Y is, what transit-oriented development is. So now thinking from another aspect, so what will happen if the Measure Y is not passed to our trains?
I can speak to that a little bit. I think that there's a potential for two scenarios to happen. Michael may be able to tell me more about this, but what we've seen going on with the other cities along the line and with their TODs. If Measure Y does not pass and that land remains vacant for a period of time, I think the first scenario is that until River Islands or Lathrop comes online, that Valley Link may have terminus at the Altamont, which would cause all the commuters that would utilize it through us to come through town to get to the west side of town to use it. And the other bigger one I think is more realistic. And a little tragic would be that the rest of the TODs do come online and the Valley Link runs the rail, runs its passage, and it passes through Tracy and it doesn't stop. And it goes from Livermore over the Altamont, it goes to River Islands, and it goes to Lathrop. And we have the impacts of the train passing through town, but we don't get the benefit of a stop.
But thank you very much, Vince. So in other ways, we can say that there will be a station and there will not be a station that depends on the vote on Measure Y. So
true. And sorry to interrupt. One thing to remember too is that the housing component that we're talking about with Measure Y, that is a requirement of the Valley Link. So by voting no, that doesn't mean that that housing component is going to go away in any future iterations of these types of projects. It's still going to be a requirement of Valley Link. It's still something you're going to have to grapple with at whatever time in the future you decide that you do want to take it up. And is that going to be too late in the game where the entire Valley Link rail system is online and we're trying to play catch up with that?
The Measure Y, the component for housing, it's critical because it allows for funding. That's really what we're talking about, is without the funding, you can't build anything unless somebody has an extra $1 billion sitting around. Applying for state and federal funding isn't going to happen unless you meet their terms and conditions. So that's what we're trying to make sure everybody understands, is that we all want the train and all of that, but we have to play by the rules and the funding mechanisms that are in place. Whether you like it or not, that's just kind of the way it is. And like Vince said, you can keep trying and changing this and changing that, but ultimately it comes down to the same thing, that you have to have that funding to build the train. Maybe you'll qualify for some funding that'll get you a certain point over the Altamont, maybe over to West Tracy somewhere, but that would be a horrible situation, because then you're going to have all of the commuters funneling to that closest station, wherever it may be, and it's going to create a nightmare versus having it spread out into North Lathrop, into River Islands. They aren't driving all the way to Tracy to get that nearest point. So Michael Tree might have a little bit better response, but that's the way we see it. Is, you know, it's just critical that we have the entire system, we get funding for the entire system, so that we don't run into these unintended consequences.
Yeah, I'd only just make a couple of comments. Certainly, it's a board policy that's been adopted that each of these train stations within the corridor would have a minimum of 2,200 units. The board really has an incredible focus on getting to the ACE North Lathrop station. That becomes an early connection for high-speed rail. It becomes a really nice multimodal connection for the ACE system and the Valley Link system. So, you know, I just think it's really important that to have a station in downtown Tracy, the policymakers and the community really needs to focus in on how to accomplish that.
Thank you very much, Michael. So then we are also aware of Measure M. So can you please share something about what Measure M is, and is Measure Y somehow linked with Measure M, or those are standalone entities?
I can answer a little bit for that one because it's a legal difference. They're completely different entities, and essentially the focus of Measure Y is a transportation initiative. So the whole purpose is to meet the regulations and the requirements to fulfill the connection to transportation. Like we just heard earlier, if we do not meet those requirements, we will not have a station here in Tracy. So that's the focus, that's the intent. We wrote the language for Measure Y, in particular, having an understanding what happened with Measure M and why it failed. And so because we wanted to be as successful as possible, so we had this discussion among City Council about the 2,200 units, and were we just going to say, go leave it at that, or were we going to be more specific? And we decided to be a bit more specific, and so what we included is what is called inclusionary housing. And so we set requirements such that we would have to have those affordable housing components. Those did not exist with Measure M. Measure M was what was called affordable by design, which is based on a purely market-based strategy. And so what it does is, in order to compete with the market, it limited the size of the properties so that they would become more affordable, but you're getting a smaller product. It was based purely on the market. What the difference that we made with the 2,200 units in the inclusionary housing was saying, for any developer, if you want to build in this region that we're designating, you will be required to build these lower rate housing units. Again, it's based on the median income of Tracy, and it's at the 100% of that median income level and the 80% of that median income level. So it's actually affordable to people who actually live here in town. And it's a government regulation, it's a restriction, but it's required for any building of any unit there. It is very different than Measure M, which has made it smaller based on a market strategy. So those are the kind of legal distinctions.
To add
okay.
Sorry about that, Rhodesia. Just quickly to add to what Dan was saying too is, you can see both maps for Measure M and Measure Y online. Downtown Tracy TOD.org has it, and you can see Tracy Press ran an article in August 2018 that shows the map for Measure Y. They are vastly different maps. I mean, you don't have to be an expert to realize how different they are in the identification of the land that was going to be utilized. Measure M had parcels all over the city and mostly outside the city. And Measure Y is strictly focused into the bow tie area. It's an infill project to prevent sprawl.
Okay, and I think it's really important to make the distinction between Measure M and Measure Y, that Measure M was a private developer who got signatures. The community, they got enough signatures in the community that they wanted to put together an affordable housing ballot measure where they were going to put together all of the different parameters. The city didn't have any control over that, and it had nothing to do with transit. It was, you know, someone saying, hey, we want to be able to answer this affordable housing thing, so we're going to get signatures and we're going to try to do it by design. The city had no control over it. The city did not put the ballot measure forward. They actually collected signatures. this is very different. It's why, and it's because we as a council talked about, do we want to put this to the voters to try and meet the requirements for the rail, to be able to have a rail stop here in our community? And what was added is because transit-oriented development is known, it gets pricey. People want transit-oriented development. They want to live in a place where there's energy and there's trails and, you know, and rail and restaurants. And out of concern that it would actually raise the price of housing so much that it would price people out of the neighborhoods they grew up in, and that it would actually, you know, start, you know, pushing people out and displacing people, we added some language to the measure that would put into policy anti-gentrification and workforce affordable housing. So that's where that 10% came from. It was not a requirement of Valley Link. It was us making sure that we were looking out to ensure that people aren't pushed out just because we want to be able to have the train stop come there, because it is going to, if it is successful, it will bring a lot of opportunity that's going to raise the income levels of the downtown housing area. So if people are going to want to live there. so that's why we went ahead and added that those protective measures. But M was a signature collecting, put it on the ballot. Y is us looking to meet a need, and we put this, the council put this forward for the voters to consider.
Thank you very much, Rhodesia. So though the Tracy is a increasing, growing town, but the citizens, they like the small town feel. So the next thing in mind is, so will Measure Y keep the aesthetics of the historic downtown district?
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about that. You know, again, we are absolutely 100% sensitive to the historic nature of downtown. We live there, we work there, that's our job. Many of us are also property owners downtown, and there are a number of historic buildings downtown. So I think, you know, the aesthetics, I think the feel, that's all gonna have public input. There's a general plan, there's a downtown specific plan, there's a TOD plan, and then there's local zoning designations that, you know, all have a say in how the look and feel of downtown is going to be. You know, with that said, you know, we want things to be sympathetic to our downtown. You look at the transit station as an example. That's a city project built, you know, about 10 years ago, something like that. And, you know, it's not a modern building by any stretch of the imagination. It's a new building, but it was built to look like the historic area that it sits in. You know, Spanish style, those kinds of things. So, you know, there's a way to do all of this that will blend in with the existing nature and design and historic nature of our downtown. Absolutely. There's, you know, infrastructure costs that are, you know, going to be handled by developer impact fees that can help with that. So there's so much that can happen, and there's so much opportunity for input. This is the very, very beginning. It's a trigger point for all of the things coming down the road to happen. So by no stretch of the imagination is anything decided, is anything designed. There are concepts out there like, hey, this is kind of the direction we'd like to see, but by no stretch is this a master plan community that is shovel ready. Once Measure Y passes, that's what's going to happen. That's not the case here. This is just a trigger point to say, hey, can we go to the next step, knowing that we can, you know, build, knowing that we can do this, knowing we have the availability of, you know, the housing component, which is critical to the funding, we can look and go forward. But yeah, we're absolutely 100% sympathetic, and we wouldn't want it any other way. We're not trying to redo downtown and give it a makeover. We want to make sure that we look at the historic nature of what's there. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too, to add on to Dina was saying, it is actually written into the ballot measure itself to preserve and maintain the community character that was taken into account when it was written.
Right, and the final point on this is that these things would have to be put into a plan. It would need to go before planning commission, and some components would, after planning commission, go to the council to ensure that the community character is protected. So that at the point that if it's approved, that's when you start having the conversations about what does a community character, you know, what does preserving community character look like? And the transit example is very is a great example. It's like, we got modern things, but they don't have to look like, San Francisco brand new skyscrapers. We can still keep with that same energy that people love about our town. So.
Thank you very much. So one more thing we have is there is a terminology called workforce housing in Measure Y. So can you please explain what this terminology means?
So workforce housing is kind of what I described a little bit earlier. What it does is acknowledge that basically any good financial person is going to tell you that the housing component of your income should be 25 to 30% of your income. So instead of kind of just basing it based solely on the market, what workforce housing does is it requires it to be at set levels for the people that make a certain amount of income in your town. So it takes that baseline, that median income in your town, which in the city of Tracy happens to be about $88,000, and then it sets it for the people at that income level and says, okay, we're going to now provide those housing opportunities for your level of income. And then what we did is also we had the 80%, so it's a little bit lower, to make sure that we're providing a mixed type of housing for our citizens, because that's what we've kept on hearing, that we need more than one type of housing. And so what it does is it provides for that, but it's created in such a way to provide that opportunity, particularly for that missing middle piece, for the kind of that middle class income that doesn't currently exist. But in order to get there, you have to kind of write it legally in a certain way, and that's what we've done.
And absolutely, we hear a lot about, it's low income housing. This is not low income housing. This is significant incomes for people that's why it's workforce housing. It's, it's to allow the people that work here to live here. And, but by no stretch is this, Section 8 or low income housing, so when you hear that, it's absolutely false information. It's AMI, adjusted median income for this project. So it's relatively high. Go ahead, Rosie. Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna unlawyer it, because after Dan spoke, I was like, let's unlawyer this thing and just say it's workforce housing. It's the people who work here should be able to live here. Think your teachers, your kids' teachers, right? So many of our teachers that work here, they don't live here, and they tell us that they can't afford to live here. They go to Manteca, they go to the next town over. Think of the people who, do services with you. Those are people who make a reasonable enough income but cannot afford to live in our town. So they're nearby in neighboring communities, but we want to make sure that people who work here can actually afford to live here, and that's by creating a middle price housing level for those people, so that we have plenty of $600,000 homes. We have plenty of, I think we got some $700,000 homes now. So we want to be able to make sure that our teachers who live here, the people who are now considered essential, who work at our grocery stores, can afford to live here as well. That's what workforce housing is keeping your workforce in your community. That's taking more cars off the road in and of itself, but it's also respecting the fact that you have people who are contributing to your community and deserve an opportunity to live here.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So these were the questions that we got from the citizens to get clarification on this measure. So before we adjourn, so is there anything that you want to add? So some relevant information for our voters to understand this measure better?
I think just one important thing is that to make sure that the community is always going to have input and involvement through this process. Like I said, this is the very beginning of this process. It's not a shovel ready, developer ready by any stretch. There's no developers even involved or have identified being involved. So I want to make sure that the community understands that even though this has been worked on for a number of years, there's a number of policies and cleanup that looked at back in 2007, 2008 to try to get us to the point where we are right now. By no stretch of the imagination is this set in stone. You have plenty of opportunity for input. We just have to have that trigger point to start the process, and this allows us to do that.
Yeah, I'd like to add a quick thing to what Dina was saying, is that this is a Tracy measure, and this is for the citizens of Tracy to determine our future. However, simply seeing everyone that's on this particular dais, Mr. Tree and Mr. Gutierrez and council members, to help people understand that this is a much bigger project than something that is only going to stem from here. It's going to be great for us, but we're trying to become more interconnected with the entire valley. And this is, like Dino said, this is that first step forward to become connected with everyone. And I think it's a great start.
And I'll just add on, I think what's really important about this project is that this is democracy in action. This is going to the voters on the ballot, and it's the voters that will decide. So we put all this work together, and we believe that this is for the best, that this will be, that Valley Link will be that connectivity that we need, but ultimately it's up to the voters. And so they'll decide. And so we're looking forward to implementing the voters' voice.
Yes, I would actually agree that I feel like exactly the same sentiment that this is really the voters' opportunity. It's important that they do their homework. There's a lot of talk out there, but I will say the good thing about this measure so far is it has brought people who have traditionally maybe not even agreed on a whole lot of things, but we can agree on this opportunity needs to be put before the voters. And so I think it's important for people to go ahead and do their homework and check out what the requirements are, and also what the protections are for this community. I think that there's always kind of a mistrust when it comes to development, right? I served on the planning commission, and you always hear, the development word's like a dirty word, but really you need to figure out if this really works for the community by just doing your homework and understand that there's certain things that the law requires in regards to infrastructure before any housing is built to begin with. So, there's just, we just really need people to do their homework before they vote. And what I love is that some places you go around town and you'll see no and yes signs on the same property. So I think that in and of itself is going to make people say, there's something about this that I need to look into. It's not up to the council members who put this before you. We just put this as an opportunity for you to be able to say yes or no to meeting the requirement. Now, ultimately, it's up to you, the citizens, to decide if this does or does not work for our community.
Thank you very much. So we have diverse expertise, and you spared your time to provide the relevant information. And as Dino has mentioned, that this is not a day's work, so it has lots of efforts, lots of background information. So I'm hoping after listening to this information, so citizens, they will have the follow-up questions. So will you please share any website or any portal where the citizens can go and find the relevant information, or if they have any questions, so whom they can reach out to clarify?
There's a number of sites. You can always go to our tracycitycenter.com site for downtown Tracy. We have a page on just the TOD topic in and of itself. The city of Tracy has a tracydowntowntod.org site that has the language of the plan in there. You can look on our Facebook, social media, Downtown Tracy. There's discussions going on, but I agree with Rhodesia. Just make sure that you're well informed and fact from fiction. But if anybody has any questions, they can always reach out to us, tracycitycenter.com, and we'll be happy to answer what we can.
And just as a quick follow-up in regard to the Valley Link project, folks can go to www.valleylinkrail.com. You'll find on the website lots of information about the project, including a quick fact sheet that you can print out, give to friends, also our TOD policy. And so it's a great place to go to learn about the project.
Thank you very much, everybody. So our main perspective was to share the information, and as you shared, follow-up questions are more than welcome. So from our platform and being a host, so I will encourage and request the voters to please explore and ask questions to clarify. So, and based on your information, your clarification, make an informed decision for November 3rd. Thank you very much all for joining and for your time and providing the valuable information to the Tracy citizens. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.